This one really bothers me. I hate the theme, I hate the art, hate the aesthetic, but I love the game. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Viral and the expansion Viral Hive from Arcane Wonders and Meebo Games. And hate's probably a bit of an extreme sentence. I dislike the theme, art, and aesthetic, and I really like the game. Viral is a game of area control. It's a game of area control that's played across board. Before we dive into that, I'll be going into these and starting with the base game and then kind of touching upon what the expansion changes it up. Viral, the base game, is going to be played across 6 rounds as you ultimately try to play your cards in order to move your viruses around the body, I guess, move them around the body in order to score as many points as possible across 6 rounds. You're going to follow a round progression along the left side over here, placing cards, going through 2 rounds of card placement, we'll explain that in a second, then moving down here, and depending on where your viruses are, you will go ahead and score 4 points for controlling those areas, but also moving up science. This is your body fighting back. Doctors are involved in dealing with whatever kind of drama is going on within the body, and so while you will potentially get points in this for what you control, you'll also be moving your trackers up and up, and if you get to the top, well, all your viruses are going to die that round. Then we move to the next phase, which is an event deck, and then from there we move to these infection outbreaks. Basically, whenever there are 3 viruses in a single area, regardless of the player count, regardless of which players are involved, we're going to drop a token there. An infection will incur. The player who has the most viruses there will get 2 points, and everyone else will get 1 point. So that's going to be the little infection outbreak. Then from over here, if the science had an outbreak, meaning if science actually reached the top, then you'll go ahead and remove all viruses from that player. And then finally, we move down to the bottom where we're going to reorder turn order based on tiebreakers, basically for whoever's there. Rinse and repeat across 6 rounds, and that's basically the game. Now, the core aspects I missed them, didn't touch upon yet, is first of all, the card play. The card play is all the players are going to have 2 hands of cards. You're going to have your hand of cards that you're actually utilizing to choose what actions you're going to take, and then you're going to have the hands that define which zones you are going towards. And so that combination of cards over here is going to determine what you can do. You're going to pick a card, and you're going to do this twice each round. You're going to pick a card that you're going with. Let's say we're doing that one over here, and we're going to pick a zone, and let's say we're doing this one over here. Now that's actually a terrible zone to place that in. Let's go ahead and do it in the heart. Okay, we're going to go ahead and place this in the heart, and ta-da, that's our spot. So we're going to go ahead and reveal this. All players are choosing simultaneously. So that choice you're making is not just based on what you want, it's based on what you think other players are going to do. You're going to go ahead and reveal that, and that means I'm going to spawn 2 units into the heart. I'm going to spawn 1 in zone 1, 1 in zone 2 of the heart, and ta-da, we've now put some people on the board. That's relevant because in order to control a zone, what you need is you need a person in each of the sectors. The brain has 1, most other sectors have 2, and then over in the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, here we have 3 grouped together as 1. And so you have to have a person in each of the sectors in order to score for that, and you have to have more than every other player. So for example, right now, I'm scoring for the heart, versus if we go ahead and add another 2 over here, then this player is scoring for the heart. But if we have this over here and this like there, meaning you have 3 but to my 2, I'm still scoring for the heart because I'm the only one who has in both sectors, assuming I'm orange, of course. But that's how you score. That's my round selection. Great. Next turn, let's go ahead, and other players are obviously all doing things. I'm not really focusing on that. This is going to go up to the top, off to the side. They are out of play. I can't utilize them right now. Let's go ahead and choose another action, and this time we'll go through a different card. Let's go ahead and do one of these over here. So we'll go ahead and put this down over here, and we'll put this down in the... Where do we want to slaughter people? The pancreas. Definitely the pancreas. So let's go ahead and find the lungs over here. The liver and pancreas, zone 4. Let's put that down. And again, it's a little easier when no one else is playing. But in this case, over here, down here, I'm going to have the option of either spawning someone or attacking. That's an option. In this case, I'm going to spawn someone because I would like to be able to control the zone. And doing so allows me to control the zone. And then from there, I can either move or I can shield up. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and shield up because I'm worried about being attacked over there. And I'm going to shield up over there that character. The next time I'm attacked or removed in some way, I will simply de-shield instead of, well, actually being removed. Alternatively, if I wanted to move, I can go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and move this character, or any character. The way it works is whenever you see a blue-backed symbol, it means it has to happen in the played zone. Whenever you don't have a blue-backed symbol, it means it can happen in any zone. And so right now I can move anywhere. I'm going to put this off to the side, and perhaps I take this one. Actually, I wouldn't do that. That'd be terrible. But let's pretend I have that extra person back in the heart. I will go ahead and move the heart down one of these arrow pathways. You want to follow the tracks. The heart veins are going to pump to everything else, and then everything else is going to pump back up to the heart, making the heart a very central organ. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and simply pop somebody else back up to the brain. I'm a little worried about someone else attacking me, so I'm going to follow that blood flow up there. That's how movement works. You want to follow the arrows. You can always pop back and forth between the zones. You can follow these little arrows between the two zones, but whenever you're moving from zone to zone, you have to follow the little yellow brick road, otherwise known as arrows. Now, all players are doing this simultaneously. Once you've done that twice in the round, that's it. You start going through the tracking over here. You resolve the zones one at a time. So in this case, I would get 1 point, but I'd also gain 1 science. Over here, I'm the one controlling it. I would get 3 points, but I'd also gain 2 science. You can see how it starts to get dangerous as your science tracker moves up and up, but as my points move up and up as well. So I want to be mindful of that. I just hit 4 points, 1 from here, 3 from here, and that also means I'm going to start the deck building process. We'll come back to that in a second. Before we do, it's worth noting now that those cards stay there next round. Those 2 zones and those 2 cards are out of play for the entire next round. So everyone else knows that I will not be popping up here or popping up here, and I have to plan otherwise around the other areas. Although that's true for all players. That degree of restriction, that degree of knowledge is present for everyone. Going back to that card drafting over there, you're going to go ahead and look over here, and you can select a card and add it to your hand, or alternatively, you can select a card from the top of your deck. You want to be mindful of both the abilities on the cards and how powerful they can be in that sense, as well as the bottom left and what they do for you. In this case, I'm going to go heavy on the protection right now. I'm going to grab 3 protection icons, anyone on the board, plus popping someone up. That armored membrane is very useful, but also not worth any points, so there is a trade-off. The better cards, the ones with more symbols, more stuff that you can do, often has a trade-off, versus some cards over here will have as much as 2 points in them, when you're, or possibly even 3, when they give you less stuff that are beneficial in the game. Those cards are going to go into your hand. You can use them for the next set of actions, and you're going to keep playing the game, going through that cycle again, playing 2 cards or 2 sets of cards each round, scoring for the sets, potentially hitting the top and then resetting, but then having everyone there die when that happens, or flip to the other unshielded side, resolving various events. So for instance, number 2, remove all viruses in the large intestine. Each virus removed scores a point. So that's going to be another aspect over here. The large intestine, you're going to remove absolutely everything for that, and you want to be mindful and balanced around how that plays out and affects your game at the same time. You're going to move down over here wherever we had an outbreak of viruses, even if the viruses then later move around, even if the game state changes, but whenever your body detects that there's too much viruses, you're going to go ahead and put one of these down, and you're going to score more points for that. So you're scoring for area control, you're scoring for the cards in your hand, you're scoring for having too many viruses where things are blowing up within the body. Then you're going to reorder turn order, rinse and repeat across 6 rounds. What does the expansion add to the game? The expansion has a few things. First of all, we're down to 5 rounds instead of 6, but that's not a bad thing. That's because the expansion gives you more stuff to do. There's going to be a few more cards that are added to the deck over here. So in my starting hand of cards, there's this ability over here that's from the expansion. That's going to be a bit of a covering, an absorbing action, or a magnetism action that lets you pull or absorb different characters, giving you a little bit more nuanced actions that are fun to go with. And then from there, we have the best part is going to be this over here. And to be clear, that you have those in the game either way. They're just in some of the cards that you start with as opposed to being in the deck over there. But then this over here is my favorite part of the expansion, and why I consider the expansion, I hesitate to use the words must-have, but I do consider the expansion a must-have. I guess for context, let's spoil some things a little bit. I don't think I would play Viral without the expansion. I think I would consider Viral to be a fine game without the expansion, but it's the expansion that has me constantly wanting to continue to play this, despite my thoughts about the theme, art, all of that stuff. But we'll come back to that. But that's, I guess, worth noting over here. I don't like saying expansions are essential, but I will. It's hard. It's hard to say for sure. Sometimes I will never play without an expansion because of how much it adds to the experience, but I don't know if it's essential because I like the game beforehand. With the case of Viral, I only played Viral with the expansion, but I can't imagine myself liking this game as much without the expansion. So we'll come back to that. Let's talk about what the expansion adds. The expansion is going to give you a set of cards. A set of cards that, let's move this out of the way just so we have some space to show you some things. It's going to give each character, each of the 5 unique factions in the game, a set of cards. And that set of cards is going to give you, let's go ahead and set these up. We have these cards over here. that are giving you a little bit of a thing to go for. You see, what you're going to have is, in addition to everything else over there, you're also going to have your own little portable hive, hence the name Hive Expansion. Your hive is going to start on a zone that you'll deal with doing setup, and when I said portable, the portable part is only for one faction, but what you'll have is you'll have that hive, and every round you're going to spawn an additional person into the hive. In addition to everything else you're doing, you get to spawn creatures or viruses into the hive, but then the best part is you get to use them. I need to flip this to the other side. You get to use them to go ahead and spend them as a currency to upgrade abilities on your faction cards over here. You see, all players are going to have their set of 4 cards, and then each of the 4 corners gives you a different ability that you can cash in a variable number of people from your hive, either the ones that were generating there on their own, or alternatively, you can literally use your other cards to spawn into the hive to aggressively pursue more expansion unlocking, and one round at a time, one turn at a time, unlocking these abilities, flipping them over, and having them for the rest of the game. And you're like, that sounds fun, but what do these abilities do? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Each of the abilities is going to be different. It's the nature of the asymmetric factions. I'm just going to go over one of them, and what I'll say is they are all equally broken. Or, they're all broken. Equally or not, I'd need far more plays to tell you. Unchained. At the end of your turn, you may place your hive in any other organ. Basically, this little hive over here can pop around 2 different regions on the board and just wreak havoc across the board, making it more and more easy to use travel, to spawn, to do all that stuff. Unbeatable. You gain +1 victory point for each zone you control. Every time you score for a region, you're scoring an extra victory point, which means that's helpful. Unstoppable. Moving your viruses out of your hive does not require an action and can be done at any point during your turn. You can simply move them out without having to spend movement actions, giving you a lot more flexibility, and all of that is all built. All those 3 other actions are built around unremovable. Your viruses that are removed from the board are placed in your hive instead. You cannot be killed when you play with this faction and upgrade that ability. All your viruses spawn directly into your hive, which further fuels your ability to level up the rest of these incredibly quickly, popping your hive around the board, and then having to not spend an action to simply wander around. This gives you a transporting, moving hive that you can do whatever you want with, and every faction is a little different. This green faction over here, I don't know if the factions have names, this green faction over here is going to give you a lot more control. You always win ties, you have some extra movement, you can move before scoring. It doesn't focus on strength, it doesn't focus on just jumping around the board, it focuses on small, minute aspects of control, but control that can mess with other players' plans. This orange faction over here, he's going to simply want to kill you, and kill you, and kill you, ignoring your shields. Killing you generates more viruses himself, just game-breaking abilities. And there's 2 other factions in the box as well, and they all have their own spin as far as the things they do to the game, and that is easily my favorite part of Hive. Watching people's Viral, I guess. Watching people's expressions as you flip over an ability and you tell everyone at the table what you can do, and they're like, that is so broken, but they don't actually complain that much because they know full well that in a turn or 2, they're going to be flipping over in their own ability, and they're just waiting for the look on your face, which means it's time to dive into the review, talking about the game, starting off with ease of play. The game's fairly easy to teach. It is unnecessarily fiddly in terms of the rules, in my opinion. The rules are just a lot of information to cover, a lot of exceptions, edge cases. I don't know, I just felt the rulebook had a lot of information. The actual getting people up and running when you sit down and play it, not that bad. The rulebook has a lot of the stuff you need to know, and it's not necessarily formatted in the way I'd like it. Not the hardest game to get into. I just find that whenever a game has a disproportionate ratio of how simple I perceive the game to be versus how much stuff or difficulty of formatting is going on in the rulebook, I think the rulebook could be better. I'm not offering to edit it, I just think the rulebook could be better. As far as player count, oh, and game time, by the way, game time, this comes in at generally under an hour. Yeah, I'd say generally under an hour. Could crawl a bit at higher player counts, but generally under an hour for the game. As far as player count, speaking of which, this is a 2 to 5 player game. I've played this one at 3 and 4. Personally, I think 3 is the sweet spot for me. I'll explain more why as we get into what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. Although it's worth noting that Board Game Geek strongly has 4 as the preferred player count. So while my personal preference is 3, and 4 is good as well, I enjoyed 4, but I think I prefer 3, but general peoples seem to prefer 4. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, let's get into it. So, first of all, the one-directional movement is an interesting twist on how the game allows you to do things and move around and wander around without having the ability to simply undo what you did. You have to be mindful, before you move out of that heart and where you go, you have to be mindful that it can take a few moves, depending on what you're doing, where you're going, to get back to where you're going. You might have to go through a bit of a pathway, a bit of a journey, to get around the board and do what you need, and the one-directional movement allows for an interesting twist of a typical area control and how it executes on that. Additionally, the multi-zone fun element over here, the fact that you need to be in different parts of a zone to score, but you actually have to be in the right side if you want to attack or kill or any of that. Means you have an interesting puzzle of trying to be present but not present. Effectively, every zone requires presence but not presence in order to score for it, which is a fun little twist. Not that different than any game with like a region composed of 3 areas, but over here it's quick, it's simple, it works well, and then having things like the exception of the brain makes for an interesting little combat zone in the brain where it's theoretically easier to control, but depending on how these come out, these tokens, and how they randomly generate, that may result in some interesting battles in the higher point regions on the board. The science of the push and pull. The science over here, the science track, the push and pull of trying to be mindful of the science track, of being mindful of the points you get and how they correspond with science, of going for higher scoring zones but having to move up the science and prepare for the fact that your clan will be wiped out across a certain number of turns. If you go for high scoring areas, expect to die from science. If you go for low scoring areas, you may be able to avoid the science, or even in the case of some of these tokens, push back your science a little bit for a lower scoring area, and that results in an interesting balance of going for those points while trying to ensure that your people die in the right and ideal way, as opposed to being wiped out from the doctors figuring out what's wrong with the body. Because as you move to this other zone over here, you have that little popping aspect, these little outbreaks that occur, and everyone just goes boom. And if you can time that around your science going to the top, you can actually have your people go out in a blaze of glory that they get rewarded for, but then being mindful of the fact that you will have to still put your people out on the board next round. That simultaneous play aspect of having to play your zone along with your card, while other players have to do the same, has a constant challenge of trying to figure out what other players are going to do, what they're going to prioritize. That first round is a little more utter chaos, but as you go into the second round, seeing what's off the table, the combination of seeing the zones that are no longer in play, plus the zones where that person is more likely to fight based on the board state, it gives you enough information to be able to make judgment calls. You might be right, you might be wrong, but judgment calls about what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and start trying to plan your victory, defeat, demise, or whatever it is, as you try to figure out what and where you're going to play. Are you going to be defensive? Are you going to be aggressive? Where are you going to do so? Are you going to focus on heavy amounts of movement to get what you want, to be able to react and adjust to what the other players are doing? Which leads to the deck building aspect. The deck building, giving you a whole bunch of extra cards you can go ahead and add to your deck. Extra abilities. We haven't even talked about this absorb ability. This absorb ability is game breaking. We have a 3-point card over here, and the absorb allows you to put your own token on top of every other player's token in the zone, effectively negating their existence until your token is dead or until the end of the round. That means when you move, they all move with you. When you die, they all pop out. And when you score, you're the only one here. And then I'm going to go ahead and score over here for this. I'm the only one there. I get 2 points. I die, and then everyone else pops out into freedom. But I completely screwed with the game state for an entire round. These aspects are, the absorb ability is a ton of fun, as is the magnetic pushing and pulling ability. There's a lot of abilities that you can pull here, and you're going to be playing, well, in an expansion game with Viral, you're going to be playing 10 total cards across the whole game. 5 rounds, 2 cards per round. You're going to be choosing 10 of these cards to continuously play to try to figure out what you can do and how you can make the most out of those selection of actions along the border. And the second stage, escalation. One thing we haven't talked about is you get to deck build here, 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 and here. And then over here you flip over these tokens and they give you a little bit more points in the game. So they introduce a little bit of an element as once you hit a certain point scoring mechanism, you're going to start flipping these over and give players more points or reduce science, giving a degree of catch-up mechanic to a certain extent that a bad first half of the game does not necessarily translate into a loss if you can play well the second half. And then finally, and most importantly, the asymmetric factions. That's easily my favorite part of the game. The game-breaking abilities, the looks on people's faces, the way every single faction feels like it's completely broken. I'm not even going to pretend to talk about balance in this game because I have no clue if they're balanced or not. What I do know is they feel completely unfair, but they feel equally unfair. Your faction that can do X, Y, and Z, well, I'm not so certain I actually want to trade it for my faction because I've just learned how to use my faction, and my faction seems to have a ton of flexibility, a ton of adjustment. And the reverse is true across all the factions. So again, I can't comment on balance. I can say that I don't have any perception of imbalance from our plays. As far as what I don't like, I really dislike the art, theme, and aesthetic. Viral gives me a game that feels like a very, very solid area control game that it has a good spot in my collection as far as the way it approaches area control, as far as the way it kind of combines the doublethink, the just abilities and nuance and trying to take over and hurt others, manipulate, outthink, all with a fairly quick playing area control experience that I just can't take seriously with the theme. Now, to be fair, by the way, or not be fair, but to talk about it, the art's from the Micho, who I love his art in most games he does. I don't find that it works well for me here. I even like the creatures. These creatures, as you build them out, I don't even mind these guys over here. This one feels more like his classic stuff. But the whole board, the whole thing going on as far as the organs and moving around, to give credit to the game, I think the game does actually implement, or whatever the word is, I think the game combines the mechanics and theme well in a way that integrates well together. But I don't like the theme. I don't like the theme of the body. It feels like it's a approachable kids game when really it's a fairly cutthroat strategy game. And in some cases that's worked for me in the past. In some cases you have games like Parks or Hey, That's My Fish that nest a very cutthroat game underneath a very cutesy looking game or pretty looking game. In the case of Viral, I don't like the theme. It's bothering me more than it should, to be very clear. It's bothering me. I just don't like the theme. It doesn't do it for me. I have a constant degree of what's the word for it? I have a constant degree of, I can't remember the word, but where I'm bothered by the disassociative, something disassociative. It's bothering me in terms of there's a word, I'm blanking on it, but either way, it bothers me. That's what it comes down to. And I'm harping on this more than I should, but I'm harping on it more than I should because of how much I actually like the game otherwise. Past that, because you can decide that for yourself, but past that, I'm not a huge fan of the event deck either. The event deck is another good example of something that feels like a degree of complete randomness that you can't plan around, mixed on top of an otherwise very strong game. And this complete randomness, the idea that I'll sit there and play out based on what I want to happen, and I may incorrectly call what you do, that's all part of the experience. The idea that I get hit with something that just completely removes all my tokens somewhere, and sure, it gives me a point, but it costs me far more than that, that can really hurt me in the game, especially if it's the last round, and you don't even get a chance to mitigate around it, you just end up losing a few points, and ta-da, somebody else won the game. The event deck feels out of place for me. The good news, and I haven't done this yet, but I plan on, the good news is you could remove the event deck from the game and never really notice it's gone. So if you don't like the event deck, you just don't have to play with it. It won't affect the balance of the game. It won't affect anything else. It just removes a degree of randomness from the experience, so you can use it if you like, you can remove it if you like. And then lastly, I kind of wish the deck building had one more card. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 cards, and then we get down here, and I kind of feel the deck building kind of peters out a drop earlier than I would like. Not a big deal, but I kind of wish we just got one more card, either right here or right after here. 5 cards would be nicer than 4. I'm just nitpicking at this point, but I did kind of feel whenever I cross here, I'm like, oh, my deck's built out. I have my starting hand, I got the 4 cards I chose, but I only chose 4 cards the whole game. 5 would do it. That's a 25% improvement. I'll take it, or 20% improvement. It depends on how you calculate it. In any case, moving on to the things that I can see others not liking. The game can be absolute chaos, which doesn't bother me, but it can be chaos in the sense that just because I can think through what you'll do or not, you can often feel, when I walk into any turn in Viral, I feel like I am going to get things done that will help me. I also assume inherently, based on the game, based on the cards, and based on your stupid abilities, I also feel like you're going to mess with me either way. Meaning every round I'm walking into, I'm going to do my best to control this, but I'm going to do things that are bad for you, and you're going to do things that are bad to me, and I have to be comfortable with that. There is chaos in this game. What you start off controlling, you may not end off controlling. What you thought you would certainly for sure get locked in this round may not happen. The aspect that you're going to flood and cause an outbreak and score points and do that, a single absorb can completely screw with your plans in this game, and so you have to be comfortable with the chaos. You have to be comfortable with the fact that things will not always go your way in Viral. And secondly, is the expansion. The asymmetric nature of the expansion, of the Hive expansion, the asymmetric abilities, and the fact that I happen to feel that every single faction I've seen so far has just seemed ridiculously strong, and I don't have a clear winner picked out. But you might not feel that way. If you don't get the best out of your faction, if you upgrade your abilities in the wrong order, if you just don't upgrade your abilities at all, and someone else goes ahead and upgrades their character and takes you out, you may feel that there's a degree of just plain unfairness in the way their faction operates, and that may sully your experience as you try to play a game where you feel someone else has a game-breaking advantage. So there's asymmetry in the game, and heavy asymmetry. It's heavy asymmetry once you have the expansion, so you have to be comfortable with that. As far as final thoughts on Viral, I am very torn and conflicted on this one. Very torn and conflicted. I really like what the game's doing. It's reminiscent of, well, we'll talk about it more in recommendations, but it's reminiscent of some other games, and I really like the chaos, I really like the abilities, I really like planning around what others are doing, I really like the playtime it gives you for all of that wrapped into a solid package over here. The chaos can be overwhelming for some, doesn't particularly bother me. For me, the biggest thing at the end of the day, the event deck is not really an issue because I could just remove it. I haven't yet, but I just think I'm going to at this point. For me, the biggest thing is I really don't like the theme. And it might be enough for me to... I don't know what's going to happen with Viral in my collection in the future. For right now, it's safe because I like what the game is doing, but it just feels like such a cognitive dissonance. That's the word I was looking for earlier. It feels like such a cognitive dissonance as I try to play this thinky area control game, paste it onto whatever sort of thing this game is giving me. And that bothers me more than it should. If this game was rethemed, if this game was tweaked and done in some different way, I would be all over this. As it is, I am conflicted, is the only way I can put it. I'm giving this one a 3.5 out of 5 for right now. I almost feel like it should be a 4, but it bothers me more than it should. It's irrational, it's illogical, the theme bothers me more than it should. I like the game a lot. It's quick, it's fast-paced, it's thinky, it gives you powers and abilities, it gives you broken powers and abilities, it gives you asymmetry. I just wish the theme were a bit different. I feel like I've said that 17 times now. It's too many. It's too many times. Let's move on to recommendations. As far as game recommendations, first of all, The City of Spies. City of Spies from the same company. Not just the same company, the same designer, which I knew was the same company going in. I know Amiibo Games. But as I was playing this game the entire time, it felt like it had aspects of City of Spies. That aspect of thinking through what your opponents are going to do, of being able to kind of plan around some general intent, but not have enough knowledge, having some degree of knowledge of what's available or not. The idea of having these cards that will give you extra abilities, stronger abilities, but some of them are worth points at the end, some of them are giving you more abilities in the game. It seems to be built around the same design approach that City of Spies had, and City of Spies is one of my favorite games, with a much better theme, arguably. Not necessarily a better title, but a better theme. So City of Spies, I love, and this one has a lot of that same design mechanics looped into the same DNA of the game. The DNA was not meant to be a DNA joke, it was just me saying the DNA of the game. But so yeah, City of Spies would be a game recommendation. And then secondly, and this one's really an unfair recommendation because it's a game that's not out, it's not even on Kickstarter yet, but Unseen Domains, although by the time you're watching this review it might be on Kickstarter. Unseen Domains is either an active Kickstarter, upcoming Kickstarter, or ended Kickstarter, depending on when you're watching this review, that gave me a similar feeling to this game in the area control, in the screwage, and the trying to plan around what you can do and how you can do it, while being mindful that your plans will be messed with along the way. Both these games, Viral and Unseen Domains, gave me a very similar feeling in the implementation of what they're doing. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good one.